Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Exercise is Bullshit, which for our first time listeners obviously means bodybuilding, utilizing logical lifting and scientific heuristics to inform training. And I am joined today by a friend from across the pond, Elliot Newman, is a high performance strength and conditioning athletic coach. Elliot, I'll let you get the rest of your introduction, but just thank you so much for joining me today. It's really nice to have you on, and I'd love to just learn a little bit more about you. Who is Elliot, and maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into to exercise science and performance.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. I appreciate it. Well, the way I got into it was a funny thing, actually. When I was 14, I was heavily into golf, and I had a golf instructor called Dennis Sheehy, who went on to coach a few major championship winners. And he was way ahead of his time, and he realized the importance of physical fitness in golf, which at the time, when you had players like, Lee Westwood and Darren Clark and Colin Montgomery, who were very, very good players, but they didn't really look like athletes. He was really thinking outside the box, and you were just starting to see guys like Tiger Woods come on the scene who actually looked like athletes. And he said to me, if you want to take your game to the next level, you've got to hit the ball further. And there's not a lot more we can do with your swing in terms of increasing speed from a technical point of view, because I had a good golf swing. So he said, you got to start going to the gym. So I was like, okay. I didn't know anything about it. He put me in touch with a personal trainer. And when I was 16, I started going to the gym. And I remember you get those newbie gains. I think on average, my weights on all the different exercises the personal trainer had me do went up 50% in 6 weeks, because it's mostly neurological, right? You get better at the technique, but it's still strength gains. And, within, I don't know the exact time frame, but let's say within 6 months, I'd added like 20 yards to my 9-iron. So a 9-iron had gone from being like 115 yards, which is quite short, to 135 yards, which for a 16-year-old kid weighing 140 pounds was pretty good. And then, I carried on strength training even after I quit golf, and I saw what difference it made to soccer, or football as we call it. Kids who, when I was 14, 15, I thought were much, much better than me at soccer. When I was playing against them when I was 17, 18, I realized that actually they weren't much, much better than me. They were just physically superior to me. They were stronger and they were faster. All of a sudden, I start training, I become stronger and faster. And these kids who used to get the better of me, I'm now getting the better of them. So between football and golf, I was like, this training stuff really works, right? And then I carried on training in the gym for a few years. And then I wasn't competing in anything, and I kind of missed competing in something because I played a lot of competitive football and golf as a kid. So I decided I was going to either compete in bodybuilding or powerlifting, because if you like training, those are two obvious sports. And I had no background in Olympic weightlifting, so that wasn't an option. And strongman back then wasn't a thing unless you were a heavyweight. So it was really CrossFit wasn't a thing. Not that I would ever do CrossFit. We can get into that at some point if you want. I'll tell you
Please.
what I call it, but I had an S before the hit. But yeah, that's an interesting story that I'll get into, and I'll tell
Got
you
it.
why. I'm not just
Got it.
being like funny. I'll tell you why I think it's
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Um, but so I get into powerlifting, and I hurt my back the first day. I decided to deadlift. And I hadn't deadlifted. I'd trained a lot. I'd done a lot of squats, a lot of bench press, but I decided to start with a deadlift only, mate. And I hurt my back with 80 kilos, and I'm like, this is not a good start. I literally could barely put my socks on after the workout. The next week, I spent mostly in bed. But it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me from a training point of view, because it forced me to really start to learn about lifting properly
Mm.
and systems of lifting properly. I realized that what the personal trainers who I'd had early on had taught me was all right, but they didn't really know what they were doing on a deep level. I realized that all the stuff that I'd read in the fitness and bodybuilding magazines, ranging from Muscle and Fitness and Men's Health through to Muscle and Fiction and Flex and Muscular Development, was okay, but it's just really pictures of juiced up bodybuilders doing bicep curls, which is all right, but there's no real depth and no real science, and not much to really learn from those magazines if you're not, especially the more extreme ones, unless you're a juiced up bodybuilder. So I ended up coming across the work of people like Pavel Satsulin and then Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell, and I was like, all Pavel's teachings about how to get tight and how tension is strength and how to create intra-abdominal pressure in the midsection to protect the lower back. I was like, oh, this makes sense after I hurt my back with 80 kilos. And like 10 months later, I ended up winning the World Drug-Free Powerlifting Federation deadlift title in the under 23 category. That's that trophy, the bigger trophy on the back there.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and
That's a
I
really
pulled,
cool turnaround and story. Yeah.
yeah, and I pulled 227 and a half kilos, no belt, no back pain, and I weighed 80 kilos. And
Wow. It
when I'd
was
hurt my
lifting
back 10 months
80.
later, yeah, when I hurt my back 10 months earlier, I weighed like 77 kilos. So I'd only put on
Jeez.
3 kilos, and my deadlift was 227 and a half, 500 pounds.
Yeah.
And at the same time, with very little jump training, like 12 to 20 jumps a week, nothing. I could now jump onto a 48-inch box, which is about up to just,
Yeah.
just above my
Yeah. That's hot.
lower
Yeah.
chest with no run up. So I was like, this style of training, the conjugate method that I learned really worked well. And then I went and trained with Andy Bolton, who was, the first man in history to deadlift 1,000 pounds. That was a really interesting period of my life. I experimented with the Bulgarian weightlifting system, but applied to powerlifting, which was interesting and also a mistake. We can talk about why, but I learned a lot from it. Then along the way, I just worked with a lot of different people, keen amateur athletes, professional athletes, sometimes high net worth individuals. I found that a bit boring. I prefer, because they usually just want to get in shape, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
I usually prefer people with performance goals, because the way I see training, if you have a performance goal and you go chase it, like a strength goal, for example, if you eat well, you'll usually end up looking pretty good as a side effect. Whereas when people get obsessed with aesthetics, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but usually they're never happy, even when they look
Yeah.
incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
it just
No.
creates this like insecure, anxious, kind of narcissistic personality that I don't think is that healthy for most people. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Bodybuilding, it's an amazing sport. What they do with diet, the discipline is fantastic, but I think it hurts more people than it helps.
It certainly breeds insecurity and body dysmorphia and all of those things for sure. You had
So,
so many more points there. I'm not sure if you have a little more in your journey. I'd love to hear it. But a few things that kind of stood out to me,
mm,
Elliot, is I think the two sports that I associate most with the resistance to lifting weights specifically for sports performance are the two that you mentioned, like golf for the
mm,
longest time, gentleman's game.
yeah, yeah,
Nobody wants to, when Tiger Woods came on a game, like you mentioned, it was like he looks like an athlete. He's the first guy that really looked like an athlete. And now you look at the tour, and I don't follow golf extremely closely, but I know a few of the names. And like Rory's jacked. I'm pretty sure he just won the Masters again.
that's great. Yeah, he did.
Bryson DeChambeau hitting the ball 500 yards is jacked. Like it's now sort of the modern thing to
Yeah,
be, the typography of the big ripped muscular guy that has no flexibility has just kind of completely been smashed. And of course there's those people, right? Like when you look at the muscle and fitness super steroided out guys, there is a lot of inflexibility, but it's only because their muscles are so big, right? Like they physically can't
yeah,
move around their muscles.
yeah.
But when you see a guy like Bryson DeChambeau that can totally torque his entire body, and it still kind of looks like a pretty decently buff dude. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I have not worked with a professional golfer yet, but I have worked with a two-handicap golfer, so a very good amateur golfer. Um, and he'd never trained before in his life. He'd played a lot of soccer, a lot of golf, um, and he had chronic lower back pain and chronic elbow pain, which is common for golfers. And he'd also had a bunch of knee pain from football. And we got rid of all the knee pain, all the low back pain, all the elbow pain, and added 6 miles an hour of club head speed, which, if you know golf, you'll know that's a lot, especially for already a very good player. His club head speed with driver was already 109. We took it to 115, which is the US Tour average. Um, and nothing we did looked like golf. It was all general training. I've seen a lot of stuff Bryson DeChambeau does, like mimicking the golf swing with a heavy kettlebell. It's
Yeah, I don't know Bryson's training at all, and I'm not a huge fan of like TPI as just kind of a whole training philosophy. But just the pure aesthetics of golfers now, it's inarguably are like more shifting towards they look like they work out, which was
they're
never the case
definitely
before.
they're definitely more athletic. And if you look at a golfer at impact, the moment when they hit the ball, and you look at like the forearms, you can see every muscle separated. There's a lot of tension going on. So obviously, the stronger you are and the faster you are, the further you're going to hit the ball. So it makes total sense. And also from an injury prevention point of view, you know, 90% of people have lower back pain at some point in their lives. With golfers, it's probably a higher amount. The
Mm.
studies show, I think it's something like the average golfer puts 8 times their body weight through their lower back at certain points of the golf swing.
Every swing. Jeez, that's
Yeah, so the
crazy.
lower back's taking a lot of. I don't know. That's probably with the longer clubs where you're generating more club head speed. You can understand why golfers end up injured in the lower back. A lot of them end up with elbow pain, shoulder issues. If you train correctly, you can go a long way towards reducing the likelihood of those problems. And also, if you do have one of those problems, the severity of it. And it's always hard to measure that. But I have an example where I'm training an international rugby player at the minute. He plays for England. Just played in the Six Nations for England, actually, all 5 matches, having never played in the tournament before. And in the build up to that, an illegal tackle was made on him in a match. So rugby's kind of complicated, but there's a certain tackle from behind that you're not allowed to do, and he got tackled this way, and he went down clutching his knee. And I was watching it, I thought, that does not look good. But he actually got up. I think it was more fear that something had gone wrong, but he got up, shook
Mm.
it off, played the rest of the match, was absolutely fine. And 2 days later, he was in the gym squatting 180 kilos, so 395 pounds for a triple with no pain. Can we say that was because of the training that he and I have been doing together? No, I can't say for sure. But I can say that that is typical. Things that may have been injuries before, you get away without an injury, or something that would have been a catastrophic injury before is now just something that you shake off in a week or two.
Yeah.
That should be the primary rules of training should be a bit like medicine, thou shalt do no harm. Like number one, don't get
Mm.
hurt. Number two, become more resilient. And then number three is how can we improve your strength, speed, power, depending on and conditioning, depending on the individual needs for their sport or their life.
Yeah, I love that philosophy, and that's one of the things we kind of talked about offline when we first met to discuss you coming on the show. And it's something that frustrates me so deeply with just the strength and conditioning kind of world in general is, this lack of acknowledgement that your job is. I love the way you said it there. It's the Hippocratic Oath. It's first do no harm. It's we're trying to create
Mhm.
injury prevention techniques for these players that have really nothing to do with their sport. It's just overall improvements of muscle, connective tissue, tendons, all of these things that are at risk when they're playing the sport that they love because of the high concussive forces, because of the high, just physiological forces as they're swinging a golf swing or, they're cutting, right? There's so many football players you see in the U.S. actual football, not European football, American football, where a guy who's a genetic freak but just cuts extremely hard in the grass when they're making a play or something, and their knee blows out, or sometimes it's getting hit by somebody else, and some of those things are just there's really no way around them because of the pure strength of these athletes. Like there's no way you're going to create a tendon structure that can support 10 times the knee's normal force load, right? But like you said, you can make somebody stronger so that it's not,
Well,
they're never going to walk again. Go ahead.
for those guys, number one, elephant in the room. And I observe this in powerlifting, and the studies back it up. When guys are using PEDs, which some of the guys in the NFL
Oh,
undoubtedly
yeah,
are,
for sure.
because they're
For
in
sure.
every big money sport they're there, and a lot of small sports too. The chance of an injury, especially to the tendons, is way higher than when you're
Yeah.
not using PD. Literally like 10 to 1. Like you look at powerlifting, you look at how many injuries occur uh, in the non-tested federations compared to the tested federations, and the non-tested federations where the guys are using steroids, they have way more injuries. Typically because the muscles get stronger and much faster than the tendons and ligaments.
In the
But
tenants too.
there's
Yeah.
ways to build tendons and ligament strength, which most people don't know. Um, Basically by doing very high reps, no focus on the eccentric whatsoever. So you do fast, very high reps on single joint exercises. So for
Mm.
those American football players, if you want to avoid injuries while they're cutting, I would have them do sumo deadlifts, really focus on forcing the knees out.
Okay.
I would have them drag a sled sideways because in the gym you tend to do everything statically this way,
Yep.
or maybe do some lunges where you step forwards or step backwards, but you never do anything sideways. And then I would do the high rep hamstring curls, particularly
Mm.
for the hamstrings and the tendon ligaments.
Yeah,
They
the
don't
hamstring
really help.
injuries are pretty common in American football for sure.
And soccer.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and soccer.
big
Yeah,
time.
and that was the other point that you kind of made early on too, is soccer in particular. For sure, there's guys who look in shape now, but that still seems to me to be, and obviously I don't follow football, European football at all. I'll watch the World Cup when it comes on every 4 years, but it seems
Yeah,
like there's still a giant stigma, and maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, within soccer federations and just soccer in general about all of those kind of things that we chatted about, like people not wanting to get too big and bulky. They want to stay fast. So there's these misconceptions wrapped around strength training of like it's going to
yeah,
somehow affect the athletes.
yeah. I mean, Logan, I can't say too much, but I had a call yesterday with a guy who runs an organization that owns some high level, really high level football teams, soccer teams. Um, so maybe I'll get to influence this soon because we were talking about injury prevention and performance enhancement. But I think the high level teams do train, they do resistance training, but, and they have very nice looking gyms, they have power racks, different bars, bands, sometimes chains. Sometimes you'll see glute ham raise, but you never see anyone on them in any of the videos. So I don't know for sure until I get into those environments what's going on. But I think in general they're paying lip service to it. When
Yeah.
they train, it's kind of pathetic. I watched some training of like Barcelona, who are one of the best teams in Europe, their so-called strength training, and it's like you might as well almost not bother. It's so light, it's
Yeah.
pathetic.
Yeah.
But to be fair to them, sometimes they have games every 3 days or twice a week. So it's a little bit different to say rugby or American football where you've got one game a week on a Friday or a Saturday. You do have to think more carefully about how to plan the training week. And, you know, I I think all of those sports are power endurance sports, but with the football it's more endurance.
Yeah.
Like there is a lot of running. But to back up your point, I don't think they do enough, and I don't think they do it as well as they could. I don't think they understand that if they moved away from, traditional stuff and moved towards advanced crawling variations and the sled work, they could train the day before or the day after a match with with no negative effect. So if you have two matches in a week, it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have two matches in a week, you've got to recover, you've got to prepare, you've got to do your sport specific practice. When the heck do you do your
Yeah.
resistance training? So so yeah, I'll know when I get into that world for sure. But based on what I've seen and heard so far, yeah, it looks like it's no far from optimal. But I think it's far from
Yeah.
optimal in most sports on the whole.
I was going to say, I think especially as you get to the higher levels of sport too. I've got a good friend of mine who was a high level. His name's Mark Asanovich, who was a coach in the NFL for 20
Mm,
years. He's done the highest of high level in American sports, head strength and conditioning coach for the Jaguars and the Baltimore Ravens and Tampa Bay
mm,
Bucks and Minnesota Vikings. And he talks a lot about that exact kind of thing. Like, what do you do with these guys in season? It's really hard to program because, yes, American football is only one game a week, but you're also practicing all week leading up to it. It's not like you're just running around, right? So all these different sports have their different kind of limitations from a training and programming perspective. And like you said, it's really up to the strength and conditioning coach and the expert that's working with the team to figure out a way, like, how can we get the most bang for the buck, injury prevention, all of these things before leading up to the season. So these guys are really strong and resilient coming into the actual season. And then
yeah,
how do we just kind of maintain as much of a baseline as we can? Because what Mark would always talk to me about is how there's just this huge drop off during the season, right? Like there's no
Uh,
way these guys are just run down. So how do
if
you get
you're
them as close to baseline as possible? Go ahead.
if if you're open to it, I'd like you to introduce me to Mark because
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to.
I, I can tell you this: the rugby player who I'm working with, the most elite guy I'm working with, he plays Premiership rugby in the UK, and he plays for England. And he's called Bevan Rod. It's no secret. And he plays prop, so he's in the scrum. He's one of the forwards, giving and taking the big hits.
Yeah,
And we've met each other at a time in his career where he's had a really bad run of injuries, just bad run. But it's kind of a good time for us to meet each other. And despite that, during the season when he's playing every week, we have actually increased his max strength.
Yeah.
And on the pitch, he feels it in the scrum. And we've also increased his strength and power endurance. Because you might turn around and say, well, if you got him stronger, his conditioning must have suffered. No. But I can tell you that we are leaving absolutely no stone unturned.
Mm.
So the guy who I spoke to in soccer, who works for the organisation who owns a couple of really big football teams in the UK, he was saying that in soccer in general at a high level, and this is the same in rugby, and I imagine it's the same in a lot of sports.
Yeah.
They're at this interesting point where players on the good side, players are wanting to do more and more to improve their performance. On the whole, we're generalising, right?
Yeah.
But he said the problem is sometimes they're going to see people outside of the club, and then someone will get injured, and it's like the guys who work for the club, the medical team want to blame the outside guy. The
Yeah.
outside guy wants to blame that.
Wants to
And the
blame the
reality
medical
is they're
team. Yeah.
not talking. They're not
Yeah.
communicating as a team. And I think that that's a huge issue. But if you understand the conjugate method, which is the method of strength and conditioning that I use with athletes, regardless of the sport, we just adapt it for the sport, then you realize that if you do the dynamic effort day correctly, the day that is designed to build a fast rate of force development, so it's like speed/power,
Yeah.
you can maintain max strength without needing to do max effort work,
Yeah.
which is a game changer. So if all you had was one session, if you could only get, say, American football players in the gym once a week, we could have them do dynamic effort box squats, bench press, deadlift, 2 assistance exercises, done. And once they build the work capacity, they can do that in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And they will maintain their max strength without doing any heavy lifting all season.
Yeah.
Well, now you've
Yeah. And
solved
that's,
the problem.
yeah, and that's similar to Mark's approach. I would be interested to hear you guys go back and forth. He's great. He's retired now. He
Cool.
just trains people out of his garage. He's awesome.
Okay. That'd
But
be cool.
I think one of his contentions too was just being in the league so long and seeing a lot of other strength and conditioning coaches, and just athletes in general. Is like you said, there's a lot of guys who, once they get to that level, right? When they're in college, you tell them what to do. When they're a pro, like if you're making $40 million a year, I don't know if you saw that documentary on Netflix, Quarterback,
I
where
did. Enjoyed it.
Patrick Mahomes has his own guy that he's been working with since he was 15. We don't even have to talk about some of the dumb shit that he's doing with Patrick Mahomes, but just in general, like, yeah. But that guy is basically Patrick Mahomes' trainer, right?
Yeah.
So now imagine you've got 10 other guys in the team that are all making over $20 million. They're trying to protect themselves. So now you've got egos, you've got the strength and conditioning, like that combination of those things. And then in European football, I can't even imagine, because those guys are making 50, 60, 70 million dollars. I don't even know how European football works. I see some of these numbers sometimes and I'm like, what the fuck are they even talking about? Because you have to pay like $100 million just to get the rights to someone. Like what?
Yeah,
Crazy. Anyways, I digress.
You buy the player, but the clubs are exchanging that money.
Got it.
The players themselves, they definitely don't earn as much as they do in the NBA.
Okay.
I think in the Premier League there's a guy called Erling Haaland, phenomenal striker, plays for Man City. I think he's the highest paid player, and I think he's earning just over £500,000 a week. So that's
Okay.
$2 million a month, so $25 million a year. In dollars, what's that? $35 million. So I think your biggest superstars still earn a bit more.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. I had no idea. Yeah, because you see those numbers trading places with the clubs, so that makes sense.
Well, then the game has changed a bit because Saudi Arabia has come along with a whole different level of money. And like they paid Cristiano Ronaldo, it was reported it was a $600 million contract over 3 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's like $200 million a year, maybe plus bonuses. And that's when he's quite a bit beyond the peak of his career.
Yeah.
But that's a different level of money. So I get you. But I mean, if I own the team, I'd be like, dude, this is what you're going to fucking do. I'm paying you $40 million a year. You're going to fucking do as you're told. Like, I would have to, and obviously you have to talk to different people in different ways. But if these people are your assets, you can't have them just messing themselves up. Basically.
Yeah, or like you said, you'd think you'd want that inner dialogue going back and forth between because Tom Brady was, notorious for having his own guy. Like I don't think he did any workouts
Yeah,
on site, even like he just had his pliability guy that he worked
yes,
with or whatever. This is super fascinating, Elliot. I want to get a little bit more into this, but I do want to get you
mm,
on, or kind of get on track to the point that I did bring you on for. So
mm,
when we were discussing things originally offline, you had mentioned to me kind of this sports hierarchy of needs, and we discussed some of it
yes.
sort of in a roundabout way as we've been going through. But talk to me a little bit about sort of the foundational principles of the needs of athletes, and then what that sort of pyramid that you described to me offline kind of looks like.
Yeah, so I first learned about this from Louis Simmons, and
Okay.
I think he said he learned about it from, the Eastern Europeans, where a lot of this good stuff came from. And basically, Louis would always say that sports like a pyramid, right? Like an equilateral triangle, um, and the peak can only be as wide as the base. So if you imagine the pyramid divided into different rows, the top row, which is very small but it's the most important, is your sports competition. So it's what you do on the pitch, on the court, in the swimming pool, on the track, whatever your sport is. The level just below, which is the second most important, is your sport specific performance. So if you're a soccer player, it's everything that you do with a soccer ball that looks like soccer. It could be basic passing or tackling drills, or it could be small sided games. If you're a basketball player, it's everything you do on the basketball court with a basketball, right? Whatever drills basketball players do. Then below that level, you've got your general physical preparedness, which is what most people call strength and conditioning, right? Doesn't need to look like the sport, but if you do it correctly, it carries over well to the sport. But then below that level, I add in a level that I call resilience training, which I see as completely foundational if you want all these other levels to work to their optimum. And then below that, you could add a level that's like recovery. It's like sleep, hydration, nutrition, recovery workouts, mental training, those kinds of things. Maybe you could add there as well stretching, mobility drills, that kind of thing. Although I don't think most people need those if you actually do the resilience training that I guess we can get into.
Mhm.
But yeah, so once people understand that pyramid, you realize that this idea that hey, and this is an amateur kind of idea, but I'm just going to play the sport. Well, yeah, but you're going to break and you're not going to be very good. That's the sad reality. If you only focus on these top two levels, competition and sport specific practice, and some people don't even bother with the sport specific practice, they just play, and you
Mm.
ignore the strength and conditioning, ignore the resilience training, ignore your diet, sleep, and so on, then the peak of your pyramid is going to be quite low. And I get it. You can't put the same amount of time into everything if you're an amateur athlete as a professional. But people need to understand, for example, why if they pick up tennis at 40 years of age, do they keep rolling their ankle or hurting their
Yeah.
knee? Why do we keep? Well, you're not prepared to do it. You haven't
Yeah.
you haven't done anything much more strenuous than squatting off a toilet for 15 years, and now you want to play tennis 4 times a week. Well, okay, fine, you can do it, but you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah, I think
You
for
know,
most people, at least in America, it's pickleball. I think that's like the new sport that is making PTs and orthopedic surgeons really happy.
it's amazing how popular that is. I just can't take it seriously, and this is totally on me. It's not. I'm not saying it's right. It's kind of a silly way to look at it, but I look at it and I'm like, why would I do that when one of the greatest sports in the world is tennis? It just seems like a purposefully dumbed down version of tennis, and I know
But it
that
is
that's not right.
exactly it's
Well,
exactly what it is though, because the bar to entry is so much lower. And this
yeah,
is as a big pickleball fan, so
okay,
I don't take that offensively or
well,
personally. But
yeah,
I played tennis for a little bit when I was a kid. The thought of getting back in, taking lessons, doing all of those things, it's just daunting, especially as you get older and you have more
yeah,
life that's
I get
happening.
it,
But
I get it,
pickleball, you show up at the court, you
yeah,
learn the rules in
yeah.
5 minutes and you can start playing. That's really not the case
That's
at all
cool. I mean,
with
look,
tennis. So
I'm not knocking it. It's good, but I can also see how people think it's easy because you do see some people they barely move if they're playing doubles. I'm like, this
yeah,
guy's not moved for an hour.
yeah, yeah,
He just swung his arm. But you
yeah,
can see how if you start getting into it and you start moving, there's going to be a lot of lateral movement, a lot of fast
yeah.
accelerations, decelerations, change of direction. And
Yeah,
if
I
you
don't know
have,
if you've seen any of like the tour stuff. Like they have a
I've seen it
professional
where they're
pickleball
knocking
tour.
it out of the building
It's
and putting it.
wild.
What is
Yeah,
this?
it's wild. Yeah,
But
some of the it's
but
go
but the
ahead.
point is a bit like squash. If you try and play
Yeah,
squash without being prepared for it, something in the lower body, be it the ankle, the knee, the hips, the lower back, is probably going to
yeah.
cause a problem.
100%. And I think it's super interesting to figure out a way to apply these principles for high level athletes to just the general population. Because like you said, there's a lot of people that want to pick up a sport, and this goes for any sport, right? It could be, oh, I want to run a marathon and I'm 45 and I decide I want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say to that person? Just go out and just do the running? Like, I'm asking. I mean, I know the answer, but tell me, like, somebody that decides, hey, I
Well,
want to, it's just running. What
I
else
mean,
could I be doing?
I actually have a friend called Steve who was a marathon runner, and he was 45, and he picked up marathon running when he was like about 40, so quite late. Um, he'd done a lot of swimming, cricket, and rugby throughout his life. Not a high level, but competitively with the cricket and the rugby, and decent hand-eye coordination, reasonable athlete. But he's like 6'2". He was about 200 pounds, and you know, tricky job, long hours, stressful, family, etc. So it's like, why are you doing this marathon running? And when I first met him, he'd tell me about it, and he was stuck at like 3 hours 45, and he'd been stuck there for about 3 years, which is not a bad time for a guy who's picked up at 40 and he's
At
not built
40?
for
No,
it
not
at
at
all.
all. Yeah.
Not built for it. So I said, like, how do you train? He's like, I just run. I'm like, yeah, I thought you'd say that. So I was
Yeah.
like, how often? He goes, well, pretty much every day. But then, like today, I've done 2 runs because I went out in the morning and did 10 miles. And then Bob rang me at lunchtime and asked if I wanted a cheeky 6 miles after work. So I did.
Mhm.
So I'm like, Steve, you're fucking crazy. Like, you're just running yourself into the ground.
Literally.
Yeah.
And
Like,
yeah,
yeah, like, he's
figuratively.
always got a cold, always a bit under.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you've got to do all this work. You've got to do all this, like, steady running and build up your level. And I'm like, look, I get that, but you're not a professional runner. You don't have the time to eat optimally. Sometimes you're not sleeping 8 hours. Sometimes you're not sleeping through the night. You're stressed with work. I don't think this is optimal. And you've been stuck for 3 years at the same time. So we have a few conversations, and eventually I get him to agree to a new plan. And the new plan was you're only allowed to run 4 days a week. You must have 1 day a week of rest. On the rest day, you can walk as much as you like, and you can do some human developmental sequence stuff. Let's just say basic movement stuff that's super low intensity.
Mm.
Then on the other 2 days, you're going to drag a weighted sled instead. So I had him drag a weighted sled for time because it was much easier to recover from, right? Because it's like you're
Yeah.
walking with the sled, but because you're dragging weight, you're building all the muscles that are responsible to make you run faster, particularly the glutes, hamstrings, calves. So as he got stronger, he put more force through the floor, not consciously, but just did,
Yeah.
which reduces the ground contact time, and therefore the marathon time comes down. So basically, within about 5 months, he went from 3:45 to 3 hours 15. Now,
Wow.
I know lots of little dweebs, like little men who are skinny and built for marathon running, who've been marathon running 30 years, who can only run about 3:15. So I was
Yeah.
like, that's pretty good. Anyway,
Yeah.
then he got so into the sled dragging that he actually was like, I'm done with marathon running. I'm just going to focus on the gym. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's probably healthier for him. He still does a
Yeah.
bit of running, but not.
Yeah.
I mean, all the research is there now to show that if you do a lot of steady state cardio and really push it, you're probably going to damage your heart.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
there
I mean,
now.
especially long term. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you
Yeah.
get
I
past
mean,
about 30 or 40.
yeah, I'm not a huge advocate of running in general. Anyways, I think there's better ways to train the cardiovascular
I,
system.
I, don't-
I used to beat the drum pretty hard that running is dumb for my clients and just like be very anti-running. And I'm not
yeah,
that same stance anymore. But as a whole, I've yet to meet in my job in particular, because I don't work with high level athletes like you work with
yeah,
super high level,
yeah,
top of the food chain athletes. My athletes are weekend warriors, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
when I see somebody that's coming to me that's maybe had a running coach that's recommended that they start doing some training, and I trained a lot of runners over the years, it's it's hard to see because people get so zealous about running. Like for whatever reason, they fucking love running. Like I think because the bar to entry is so low, anybody can do it. There's a ton of groups and community and things, probably similar to like CrossFit. Um, but they just are always injured. I've never met a runner who's not injured all the time,
yeah,
especially the types of people that come to me because
yeah,
they're doing it part time, right? So, and it's like,
yeah.
just stop for 6 months and let's
Well,
fix some
there-
shit.
there's a few interesting thoughts that I have on running, and they're just
Yeah.
observations and thoughts. But when I was playing tennis a few years ago at the tennis club, there was a running club as well. And a lot of those people are on their third set of knees. So
Yeah.
like they have had their knees done at 50, they've had their knees done at 60, and then they're still running. I'm like, what are you going to do when you're 75? And the doctor says, actually, we don't really want to operate on you at 70. It's just
Mhm.
moronic. So it is
Yeah.
pounding the pavement at a steady pace constantly seems rough on the ankles, knees, and hips, especially if you don't do anything to prepare for it, which they don't. I mean, they might do some
Yeah.
like crappy static stretching, as if that
Yeah.
prepares you for anything.
Yep.
Like, so here's my other thought on running. I think sprinting is a beautiful thing. I mean,
Yeah.
when I watch the Olympics every year, what's the one thing that I will not miss? The 100 meters.
100
Men
meter.
and
Yeah.
women, the 100
100%.
meters,
Yeah.
and 200 meters and 4, to be honest. All three
Yeah.
spinning.
Yeah.
As soon as we get to,
And the group ones, the relays are also super
yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
as soon as we get to 800 meters, I'm like, not as bothered.
Yeah.
Because I think that we are designed to walk and sprint. Because if you think about it, when we were like hunter-gatherers tens of thousands of years ago, we would have walked a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then when we wanted to catch something, we would have run. Or if we needed to get away from something, we would have run. And you wouldn't have jogged, you'd have really run.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
I
we're
mean,
designed
I've
to
always
like
thought it
walk,
was
sprint, throw,
funny.
jump,
Go
climb,
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
you know? Like walk, sprint, throw, jump, climb, fight. Not jog. That's not
Yeah.
part of it. So here's another thought on running. How many runners do you ever see who look good? None of them look good. They all look like a bag of shit. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like
At least
gravity.
the highest levels. Yeah. Yeah. And
Well,
a lot even at in the moderate levels. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like at the highest levels, they all look really skinny. But
Yeah.
if you just watch people who run, like walking down the street, if all they do is run,
Yeah.
they don't
They
really
don't look
have
great.
much muscle. They don't. They're often not usually that lean. And obviously, there's going to be someone listening going, "Well, I know this person who's 6% body fat and all that." I
Yeah.
get that, but in general,
Yeah.
people who run, they always look like they're in pain. They're always breathing
Yeah.
out of their mouth like a dog. Like I mean, the list goes on, like on and on and
You're
on.
preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I
You don't
mean,
have to convince me that running is dumb.
and if all
But
you did was drag a weighted sled with a moderate weight for distance, you would actually get better at running without all the impacts.
yeah, no,
Which is
100%. I think that's great. Talk to me a little bit about just this sports pyramid. Let's get a little more into the specifics of things. So, kind of building from the base up. When you talk about recovery, how do you sort of start to implement these things with players? Because I think the first two, the highest points of the pyramid are pretty self-explanatory. It makes sense. If anything, athletes, especially high level athletes, have been doing those things their entire life, right? Like I think of basketball players all the time. Basketball players are notoriously like don't want to strength train, don't want to do anything else. They just want to play basketball. I imagine footballers are similar, where they just want to play, right? So how do you
Mm.
start to implement some of these things with athletes, starting with like the recovery, the sleep, the hydration, all of that stuff?
Well, you got to meet people where they're at, and some people already have this stuff taken care of, but most don't. So I try and get a feeling for where they're at and how hard I can push them in terms of how much can I give them, because some people can only manage to change one or two things at a time, which is fine. Other people want to know everything straight away, and within a fortnight they've got it all implemented and they're doing it all. So as far as sleep goes, what would my advice be? Number one, try and go to bed and get up at the same time every day. If you can go to bed between 10 and 12 and get up around 6, that seems to work best for most people. And it also aligns with a lot of the spiritual teachings. There's reasons why I don't want to get into them now, but that seems to work well.
Yeah.
In terms of how to optimize sleep, well, the general stuff, a comfortable mattress, make sure the bedroom's reasonably cool, pitch black if you can. Then the bit that I think most people miss is sleep grounded. There's a book on Amazon called Earthing, the greatest health discovery ever, and it explains how being earthed or grounded really speeds up recovery.
Would that be like a grounding mat that you're
Yeah,
sleeping on or something?
yeah, but you can get grounded bed sheets now.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, so it has the same effect as if you were to go outside and sleep on a conductive surface like grass or dirt. And that is very beneficial. And it's beneficial because when you have these grounding sheets or whatever, pets always want to sit on them.
Mm,
Because animals tend to be much more in tune with their body than
yeah,
humans.
for sure.
Like when an animal's going to die, like a dog or a cat often knows it stops eating. It
Yeah,
knows.
yeah,
Whereas we've lost all that, like our connection with nature. But basically, it reduces inflammation and speeds up recovery. So sleeping, earthing, or ground is a big deal. Um, in terms of diet's a minefield, Logan. I feel like we'd have to get on another podcast to do that any
Yeah,
justice.
just give me kind of
Um,
some high level
well,
recommendations because I
I
feel like diet's one of those things where it's like people know what they should do in general,
uh,
like avoid processed foods for the most part,
yeah.
avoid super highly palatable things, and just eat
So
more
I
whole foods. But kind of give me
yeah.
your general recommendations. If somebody comes to you,
So
what should I be
my
eating?
my general recommendation would be eat a minimally processed diet, focusing on wild and organic foods wherever you can. But a few years ago, I discovered something called the Korean 8 body types diet, and it explained a lot of things to me. Because these days, diet is like it's like religion and politics, right? People
Yeah,
get
100%.
really into
Yeah,
like defending their diet. But what you notice is from one extreme to the other, whether it's vegan or keto or paleo or vegetarian or carnivore, none of these diets work for everyone.
yeah,
But the people who are really into it want to say that they do. So this Korean body type system explains a few things. So without going too deep into it, because we could spend 3 hours talking about it, I will say
yeah.
this for people.
Okay.
Number one, figure out if your body responds best to multiple small meals throughout the day or one, two, or three larger meals, because there is definitely a difference. Like the whole idea that you should eat 6 or 8 small meals a day, like a bodybuilder. Yeah, some people should, but it's not optimal for everyone. It's good for me, for example. I
Yeah,
need small and often. If I eat too much, even if the food's really clean, stomach doesn't like it.
yeah. See, I'm the
And
opposite. I
that,
prefer to only eat 2 to 3 times a day and
if
a
it
little bit
works, it's great.
heavier. Yeah.
I then the other thing is figure out whether your body responds better on the whole to higher carbs or higher fat,
Mm.
because you definitely need both. But some people definitely burn carbs better, like me, and some people definitely do better with fat. And between that Korean body type diet system that I studied, and people can look that up. You just type into Google Korean 8 body type system, and you'll find it. There's not a lot on it, but you'll find it. Between that and some genetic testing that I did, it explained to me why I do better with small, frequent meals and higher carbohydrate and lower fat. And obviously, I do moderate protein too.
Yeah.
That's like a no brainer.
What do
But
you recommend from a protein perspective, especially for your athletes?
again, it depends on what works well for them. Not all
Yeah.
of them want to hear about the body type system, but I'll just say to them, what protein makes you feel good? Do you feel good after a steak, or do you feel good after chicken or fish?
So I feel like that's great advice for athletes. And again, we're talking about the spectrum of human experience, right? So for me, I like a lot of the diet stuff that you just mentioned. I feel like
Yep.
that's reasonable advice that I could give to clients
Yes.
with trust your gut, for lack of a better word, on protein. Oh my God, it's never going to work for people. Like they have to have rigid rules on my end of the spectrum because if
Well,
they don't, you
yeah.
find people drastically
Okay.
under eating protein.
So
Um,
if you eat, oh, I see what you mean. So as in
yeah,
general, we would go 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So
yeah, perfect.
if I'm 75 kilos, which I am, I would eat like between 110 and 150 grams of protein a day. If
Yeah,
I eat if I eat 5 small meals, I'd try and do about 30 grams of protein with each meal, which is about a chicken breast or a scoop of protein powder, typically, right?
yeah,
Those
yeah.
kind of rule
That's
of thumb.
that's approximately the general recommendation I give as well is zero point
Yeah.
0.7 to
With,
1.2 grams per pound.
with any food, I would tell people that regardless of whether you've heard it's healthy or not, if you eat that food and you get bloated or gassy, that food's not good for you.
Mm.
The only object, I should point out the only thing being that you need to chew with your mouth closed as well, because if you chew with your
You're
mouth open,
taking
then
in too much. Yeah,
yeah, so then it could be that's causing the gas. But if you notice that you're bloated, gassy after certain foods, it's probably not good for you. As long as you're chewing your food thoroughly, mouth closed, etc.
yeah.
That makes sense.
That's great. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great advice. And I think there's a lot that doesn't get talked about enough from just the actual like eating process, right? Like eating, being focused on eating, taking your time with eating, all of those things that a lot of people just in our world of, I've got to do more faster. It's hard to actually enjoy the process of eating.
if you want another one that's like figure out what works for you, it's do you do better with liquids with food or liquids between food?
Mm,
So for me personally, if I eat a meal and then drink a glass of water, it doesn't feel good. Whereas some
okay.
people it feels fine. I'm better off eating and then an hour or an hour and a half later having a drink, and then
Okay.
an hour and a half later having a meal. Um, so that's another interesting point. And then the other thing is, if people want to go really deep, depending on budget, maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months or even once a year, do some blood testing and check those basic things like your B12 level, your vitamin D level, things like that, because then you can modify your diet or supplement accordingly.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And you're kind of tinkering more into like the health optimization side, which I do
Mm,
with some of my clients. But again, for a lot of the people that I'm talking to specifically on a day-to-day basis, it's they're so far on the left-hand side of the spectrum of
okay. Well,
non-optimization versus optimization. But
okay.
I think this stuff is
Well,
super interesting and you can apply these principles across the spectrum. It's just how often you're doing it, right? Like I
I
think a
mean,
blood test for somebody that's not a high-level athlete is super important because it can
I
point
think
out a
so.
lot of deficiencies that they have and can kind of be eye-opening.
I think some other what advice would I give like someone who's not a professional athlete? One thing is, if possible, plan your meals.
Yeah,
Because
that's a
if you
great one.
don't plan them, you often get caught short. I've done this. You end up on the motorway or something, or the highway as you call it, and there's a crappy service station, and you go in there and you can't eat anything decent.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think those are some good points for people to consider. The other thing
yeah.
would be don't keep junk food in the house.
That's a great one.
It's a kiss of death, man. If you
Yeah,
keep that junk food in the house, it's going to come to a point in the day where maybe you're stressed, or maybe you haven't prepared your food and you're suddenly hungry, or maybe you're just watching Netflix, chilling out in the evening. And I've done this. If the ice cream's in the fridge or the freezer,
yeah,
or there's cake or chocolate, you go grab it.
yeah,
If it's not there, and all of a sudden it means putting your shoes on, getting dressed, going out to the shop, you probably won't do it.
yeah. Where your likelihood of doing it is significantly lowered for sure. I think that's all great.
Mm.
Talk to me a little bit about just the resilience piece from the pyramid. What does that look
Well,
like?
this is the most important piece. And to be honest, if I didn't know these systems, if I wasn't fortunate enough to have been introduced to them and done them myself for like 16 years, I don't think I'd work with the caliber of athletes that I am because I don't think I'd have enough to differentiate myself. But basically, when I was powerlifting in my mid 20s, I got very stiff. I think I told you this when you and I had a chat.
Yeah,
And it would take me like, 30 to 45 minutes, Logan, to be able to squat to powerlifting depth, which is not ass to grass. It's just crease of the hip slightly
yeah,
below top of the knee. Most people would call that thigh parallel to the ground. If you've got massive thighs, that doesn't work. But for someone like our size, it does work. So thigh parallel to the ground. So I'd go in the gym, do some
you haven't
stretching.
seen my legs, Elliot.
Fair enough. maybe
No,
you've
I'm just
got
kidding.
maybe you've got a 300-pound guy in legs, are you? But so I'd go into the gym with my training partners. They'd be rolling their eyes because I'd be doing stretching, mobility drills, foam rolling. I'd get under the bar, still couldn't get to depth. I'd go through this routine 3, 4 times, and it'd sometimes take 45 minutes.
Jeez.
And they'd take like 10, 15 minutes to warm up, which was much more reasonable. And then I went to America and I met a guy there called Jeff Newport, and he introduced me to the human developmental sequence, basically the sequence of movements that we go through innately from the day we're born, as long as we're healthy, to about the age of 3 years old. So it takes you from being able to do virtually nothing to being able to walk and jog. And he said, if you go back to doing these movements a few times a day for just a few minutes, you'll notice really good things happen. So I start playing around with these movements for like 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. And within 2 weeks, my warm up before I could get onto the bar and squat was like 2 minutes. I'd go in the gym, do these movements. I'm like, guys, I'm ready. What are you fucking around for? And they'd be like, hang on, 2 weeks ago, you were the guy taking half an hour to 45 minutes. And I was like, yeah, but I've been doing this stuff. And basically, the science of it is this: if you have trunk stability, as in midsection stability, and you have head control, then that improves posture. And then as your posture improves, it improves proprioception and motor control and reflexive strength. And that helps you move through space and time more efficiently, whether you're getting out of bed, walking up and down the stairs, or you're on the football field, right? And that greatly improves balance and coordination, and the whole shebang, when you put it all together, makes you way more resilient. It
So,
really
what do
makes
some of those movements look like, Elliot?
well. So the first movement is diaphragmatic breathing, because when a baby's born, that's all it does. It lays on its back all day and it breathes through its nose.
Mm.
As people get older and they move through life and they get stressed, they often tend to breathe through their mouth a lot, and they breathe more like this. I'm exaggerating, but the shoulders
Yeah.
rise and fall. When we breathe diaphragmatically, we're trying to get the midsection to expand, the sides to expand, and the lower back to expand. So it's like a 360-degree belly breath. So as I breathe in through my nose, I feel my belly come out. And then as I breathe back out through my nose, I feel my belly retract. So there's some diaphragmatic breathing. You can do that in different positions. People could start out doing it quadruped. So just on their hands and knees, wrists underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips, look straight ahead, mouth closed, teeth lightly touching, tongue on the roof of the mouth. Just breathe in and out through the nose slowly, feeling the belly and the sides and lower back expand. Once you've done the diaphragmatic breathing, you can move into head control. So in that same position, we can do some head nods like this.
As you're doing your diaphragmatic breathing?
Yeah, but notice that I'm not syncing the breathing with the breath.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
did
Just
two or
going.
three head nods on one breath in, and then I did two or three head nods on one breath out. And then you can do neck rotations like this.
And this is still on all fours.
Yeah, there are many positions you can do it in,
Got
but
it.
it's good if people want to go away and try it. Yes. Now, those neck rotations and head nods are also a really good way to gently strengthen the neck, which
Mm.
nobody does, and then they wonder why they
Yeah.
have neck pain.
I'm a
You
big
know,
advocate of neck strengthening. Almost nobody does
yeah.
it. Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, the other day I was demonstrating to a rugby player the wrestler's bridge,
Mm.
and I was like, I thought to myself, I've not done a wrestler's bridge in like 10 years, and I had to train pretty hard when I was powerlifting before I knew the system to do a wrestler's bridge. But I just got on the floor and did 10 reps. That's only from doing head nods and neck rotations for the past like decade. So
Yeah.
although it's low intensity, when you do it daily, it adds up.
Yeah.
So then there's some rolling variations, right? Simple roll could be lay on your back, pull your knees into your chest, head on the floor, look to your right, roll onto your right side, look back to your left, roll onto your left side. Pretty simple. Then there's the rocking exercise where you're back on all fours, looking straight ahead, and you rock forwards till about 80% of your weight feels like it's on your hands. Then, keeping your lower back in a neutral position, rock backwards as deep as you can go without losing your lower back posture.
Mm.
And babies do that after they learn to roll.
Okay.
Then there's crawling, and then there's a few other bits, but that's the basis of it: the diaphragmatic breathing, the head control, the rolling, rocking, and crawling. And once you master the baby crawl on your hands and knees, you can progress to advanced crawling variations with your knees off the floor. Now, you see a lot of people do that, like they'll do a bear crawl with the knees off the floor. But the technique most people have is horrible because they have no trunk
Mm.
stability or head control. So the
Got it.
hips move a lot as they do it. And when the hips move a lot, you're chewing up the lower back. Whereas if you can crawl with the knees off the floor, with the lower back, with very little movement at the hips, the lower back is stable. Now you're reinforcing good posture, not breaking it.
Mm.
There's so many subtleties, like so many
Yeah.
subtleties. But that system, the human developmental system, there's basically 8 positions that we can do the breathing and the head nods in. Each position has 3 or 4 progressions, 2 different types of breathing. There's a second type that is I need to show people in person, and two
Yeah.
different types of head nods. The second type's a bit tricky, but it's a very full system. But it makes people really resilient. And because you're breathing through your nose diaphragmatically as you do it, it's very relaxing. People can
Mm.
actually try this. If they try the movements we suggested, after you finish training, do 10 diaphragmatic breaths, 10 head nods, 10 head rotations, roll on your back 10 times each way, rock backwards and forwards 10 times, and just do 20 or 30 steps of baby crawl forwards. You'll feel the tension in your body that is often there after you've done resistance training just melts away.
Mm.
because you're getting out of that parasympathetic nervous state into the parasympathetic nervous state. The key point being, you can do these movements anytime, and they'll never take anything out of you. They're restorative, which when you're working with athletes is great because they can do it whenever they want. They can do it before a match, after a match, before training, after a training, before strength and conditioning, after, first thing in the morning, last thing at night. To be fair, the average person can do that too. They could do it once in
Yeah.
the morning, once at night, 2 or 3 minutes, and make a big difference over time.
Yeah, I'm gonna look more into this. I'm super interested in this idea and try it on myself, and then see how
Well,
that applies to
totally.
some of my clients. Yeah, because I
Because
think
the opposite is, just to reiterate this point. When I get up from this podcast, I will spend 5 minutes doing those movements. The opposite is, I get up from this podcast, I feel a little bit of tension in my lower back, a little bit of tension in my hips, and I ignore it. And I do that every day for years on end,
mm,
and then I expect to feel good when I'm 50. It's
yeah.
not going to happen. These movements allow you to reset yourself every time you get up from a chair, or you've been sat in the car or something.
How long does this whole sequence take?
It can just be, if you did what I just said, it would take 2 or 3 minutes once you know the movements.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
nothing time wise. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone who
Yeah.
says they don't have time for that, they're kidding themselves.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm gonna definitely look more into that. I might even message you offline about a good resource
I-
to try to find some of that stuff, or maybe I can link
I'll
it.
send you a video that I've made that by this point I've shared with tons of athletes, friends, family,
Yeah.
etc.
Please do.
And it's more or less the movements I just talked you through. I'll send it to you, and then you can try it online and let me know how you go.
Is it linked online? Like, is it on a website or
No,
something, or is
it's
it
just
just
on
a?
WhatsApp. I will
Got
put
it.
some stuff online about it, but the world I'm in is so much about referrals.
Yeah.
That's why
I'm just
my own.
wondering if I could link it in the podcast. That was
Yeah,
more my question.
no. The only thing I've got at the minute is my website, elliotnewman.com, my LinkedIn. I don't have YouTube or Instagram or anything like that. Maybe I
Got it.
will at some point, but yeah, when you're working with athletes, they're not watching
It's all
YouTube, and
reversed. Yeah.
it's
No,
a
I get it.
different world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was just thinking more as a resource for, if this is something I try and enjoy, how can I share it with my own clients? But I guess I could always just record
Well,
myself doing it and share it as well.
you'll be able to. Once you learn the movements that I share with you on WhatsApp, you'll be able to teach them to your clients, the basics of
Mm.
it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, awesome. I think, the rest of this stuff here, the general physical preparedness, the sport specific performance, and then just obviously the actual sport all kind of makes sense. So as we're kind of running up on time here, I'd love to hear, in the beginning, you sort of mentioned some of your issues with CrossFit. I'd love to get a little bit of your thoughts on cross shit specifically.
Oh God, where do we start, Logan? I mean,
It's at the
all right.
beginning.
Here's what I mean. I've got so many
So
thoughts
so
on
let
this.
me let me let me start let me start here first, Elliot, because I actually did CrossFit for a number of years. So I was in my
Mm,
early 20s. CrossFit was just exploding on the scene. I was living in Orlando. I think I was probably 22 when I started, and up until about 26, I did CrossFit 3 or 4 times a week. Loved it. And now I'd always worked out growing up, but until I was almost 30, I'd never actually done any like personal training. I'd not taught or like done any investigation into the research side of things. It was just bro lifting for a long time, like reading the
yeah,
muscle magazines, things like that. But I always loved working out.
yeah.
So when I found CrossFit, it was introduced to me. It was probably the first time in my life, and this is one of the few things that I will say that I really give CrossFit credit for. Is it was the first really intense workout I'd ever done since like sport back in the day. Like feeling just completely trashed after a workout, which I enjoyed because the workouts are really hard, especially if you push yourself. So that was
Mm,
kind of my first exposure to what I would call like high intensity effort in an actual exercise routine. So that I'll give it credit for. Now I was the epitome of all the things that are wrong with CrossFit, right? My form was shit. I was just trying to beat numbers. There was very little supervision, so like we weren't actually very safe. I injured myself all the time. I still have a lingering shoulder injury over 12 years later from doing like kipping pull-ups. So
Well,
yeah.
when you do these movements, watch what happens to your shoulder.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm willing to bet it starts to feel better.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten a ton better. So I'm a big believer in hanging therapy. I don't know if you're familiar with hanging therapy. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did that for a long time. That's helped a lot. I recommend that to all my clients that have shoulder pain. And I'm just smarter with the way I train now too. But it's still there is the point. Like it's 98% better than it ever was. But every once in a while it's like, oh, that's
Well,
CrossFit.
let me give you my thoughts on CrossFit. So
Yeah.
the first thing I will say is that it did get a lot more people into resistance training, which, without analyzing what state they're in now, I will say is a good thing. It
No.
encouraged more people to work out at the gym. Okay, there's a tick in the box. And the other thing is, if you want to compete in CrossFit and that's your sport and you happen to love it, fair enough.
Yeah.
Who am I to say? You know, if you like cricket, go play cricket. If you like golf, go
Yeah.
play golf. But that's not what most people are doing with CrossFit. Most people are using it as a way to work out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, whatever it is, right? And I would say that it is an abysmal way to work out because
Mm.
there was a study done a while ago that showed that in the NFL, 99% of injuries happen on the football pitch.
Mm.
That presumably means that less than those other 1% of injuries happen elsewhere. Maybe someone, has an accident at home. Some of them happen in the gym, etc. But what it means is that resistance training, because those guys all do resistance training, is incredibly safe. It
Mm.
is a very, very controlled environment, right? Well, if you look at CrossFit and how many injuries people get, whether it's people walking in off the street and jumping into the deep end in a workout or with a group of people they have no business training with, or whether it's actually in the CrossFit Games where some years they've had ridiculous injury rates, including someone who fucking died.
Oh yeah, I
Someone
remember that.
died.
That was like, was that the swimming thing?
It makes me angry, man. Like,
Yeah.
you were so bothered about this sport that is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Like, this is not the World Cup in football. It's not Wimbledon in
Yeah.
tennis. You all swam past someone who was drowning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where, and also, not only did nobody help who was swimming, because you might say, well, they were so focused. All right, I get that. They were in the state of flow. Where were the officials helping this?
Yeah.
So somebody died. So I'm like, you've taken something that's really safe and you fuck people up with it day in, day out, and then someone dies. So I'm like, this is not good. So
Yeah.
the answer is, why is it not good? Well, we could, and I actually want to say that there are good CrossFit gyms out there. Years ago when I was in America, I went to Kelly Starrett's CrossFit gym, and he's a great guy. Everyone in his gym was working out really well, but that seems to be the exception, not the norm. I
Yeah,
have
for sure.
I have two friends here on the Isle of Man who go do CrossFit, and they both completely hurt their lower backs, really hurt their lower backs badly, doing 6-inch deficit deadlift. So for people who aren't familiar, that's a deadlift put on 6-inch block. I said to them, why was he having you do a 6-inch deficit deadlift? Like, what's the point? And they said, yeah, we wondered that. And we asked the coach, and he just sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's what the workout of the day is. That's the answer. And then they defended
Yeah.
it because people like to
Yeah.
do this. They like to
Yeah.
believe that whatever they've bought into is being delivered well.
Yeah.
So we could rip CrossFit to shreds all day long. But the long and short of it is, if you insist on making everything a competition and everything against the clock and everything about beating your best reps or last time or best
Hmm.
time, you will at some point sacrifice quality and get hurt and injured. And that's what they
Well,
insist to do all the time.
yeah. I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's you're working out playing a sport. And we already know that the majority of injuries in all sports happen playing the sport.
In the
So now
sport.
you're not actually working out anymore. You're playing the sport with really
The,
heavy weights,
the,
which
the,
is
yeah,
especially dangerous.
and the other thing is, like, I read this on the website years ago by that guy who invented CrossFit. So it may be out of date now. They may have updated it, but
Yeah.
basically, he was basically saying that CrossFit like prepares you for anything that life can throw at you, and it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend that lifting weights makes us superhuman.
Yeah.
It makes you
Well,
stronger. It makes you faster. That's all.
it's interesting. So I did. There's a a big convention in the States for home gym fanatics. It's called Home Gym Con,
Okay.
which is awesome. I have a friend who excuse me, uh, owns a home gym company. So he makes tons of different equipment. So I was there helping him, and I decided to sign up for this event. I haven't done CrossFit in 15 years probably.
Mm.
And I train the way that I train now, kind of the modified bodybuilding, high intensity sort of style.
Okay.
But I was like, oh, it's cheaper to get a ticket to the event. I'm not going to try to kill myself like I normally did in CrossFit before,
Mm.
and I can potentially win some prize money. So there was
Nice.
probably 10 people there. I haven't done CrossFit in forever. I don't really do Olympic lifts or barbell lifts at
Yeah.
all anymore. And I came in second. So it's like there should be now.
Very
And what really killed me was my cardio is shit. Like one, I hadn't done a lot of these Olympic lifts, so
Yeah.
I was just really poorly neurologically prepared.
Yeah.
So the people who had done that stuff were blowing by me on there, but the general stuff, swing a hammer,
Yeah.
burpees, all that stuff, I was totally fine. And then I just died on the little ladder thing at the end. but the point being, if you want to do CrossFit, you should train separately and then do CrossFit
Yeah.
is
I mean,
probably a smarter way to do it.
I think, like, the athlete. I want to point out as well that the athletes who compete in CrossFit at a high level are very impressive. You
Yeah.
know, as Louis Simmons said, he described it as the sport of GPP, the sport of general physical preparedness.
Yeah.
But if I want to watch Olympic weightlifting, I want to watch the best in the world Olympic weightlift. If I want to watch people who are really good at bodyweight exercises, I want to watch people who just focus. I watched this documentary on CrossFit not long ago, actually, on Amazon Prime, and it focused on that girl who ended up winning it multiple years. She's very impressive.
Yes.
She's an
Yeah.
Aussie.
Tia something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had this year they had a mountain bike section. It's like I do not want to see
In
these guys.
CrossFit?
Pathetic. Like
Oh my gosh.
it was like I've ridden a lot of mountain bikes. I'm nothing special, but I can go to a mountain bike trail and go down most of the red trails, which are one below
Yeah.
black. Well,
Yeah.
this was it wouldn't even be a blue trail. Like I don't need to see these jacked people trying to
Yeah.
ride a
Riding
bike.
bikes.
It was pathetic. Like you
Yeah.
just think you can do anything now. And
Yeah.
and it's like the whole the whole randomness of it. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense because you're going to end up overtraining some things, undertraining others. If you look at the other big thing is, well, there's so many things, but if you look at the best powerlifting systems and weightlifting systems, so the best systems developed by people who know how to lift weights better than anyone else in the world, the barbell lifts are typically done using a rep range of 1 to 5 reps.
Yeah.
Whereas in CrossFit, sometimes you're doing endless reps.
No,
And,
100.
you know,
Imam to 100. Yeah.
whereas, there's a reason why, particularly with the conjugate method that I use, made famous by Louis Simmons, the high repetitions are done mostly on single joint exercises or even machine exercises. Why? Because it's safer.
Yeah.
With the barbell stuff, it's mostly 1 to 5 reps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they
I mean,
get
it makes sense.
it's actually crazy. And as
Yeah.
well, for the record, I think that we were talking about steroids earlier. I think that when you watch the CrossFit
Oh.
game, I would be surprised if many of them are not juiced up to the gills.
Oh. To the
Especially
gills. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Oh.
I've never seen women that look like that.
No, with like 8
Not really.
packs. Yeah, it's bananas. Yeah.
Not really.
Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Elliot, I
So,
really appreciate you taking the time today. Is there any other last tidbits, nuggets of wisdom, anything like that? Do you want to share?
dude, Logan, we've had a great conversation. We've
I
talked
know,
about
this is
so
awesome.
much. I would say, like, what would I say to the average person? I would say, pick a style of training that you enjoy and that you can stick to consistently. I would say focus on technique above all else, because with good technique, you are safer and you'll be
Mhm.
stronger. So what's not to like other than the time it takes to master it? I would say make sure that you eat well, sleep well. And in terms of eating, particularly, make sure that you eat well the meal before training and the meal after training. That
Mm.
that meal after training, if you can get it in within an hour of finishing training, and you go like 30, no, depending on the size of the person, 25 to 40 grams of protein, depending on the size of the person, and the carbs could be anywhere from 30 to 100 grams. of some fast acting carbs, right? It could be
Mm,
maltodextrin, it could be white rice, whatever you want, depending on whether the size of the person, how hard they've trained, and what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to gain muscle, lose fat, etc. And leave fat out of that meal so that that protein and carbs is digested quickly.
mm.
That has a remarkably positive effect, especially if you stick some creatine in there on recovery and gains.
Yeah, I love that. And then the only other thing I wanted to add on that with the technique piece, there was a recent, I don't know if you saw the new ACSM position stand that came out recently. No, so it's the American College of Sports Medicine. It was their first position stand in like 16 years. And essentially it was just, I enjoyed it for the most part. Like it really, the last one was not super evidence-based in 2009. It was like one or two studies that they were citing for each thing. And most of the studies had like less than 10 participants. This one, they really dove in. They did a giant like umbrella analyses, over 30,000 participants, and some big takings and findings or takeaways and findings. And you just made me think of with the technique piece, for rep speed, that's something that gets talked about a lot in my industry specifically,
Yeah,
just with like strength training for general population.
yeah,
I, there's almost no difference in 1 rep speed versus 8 rep speed, right? It doesn't matter how slow or how fast you go. The results from a hypertrophy and strength perspective are going to be almost identical. I think the thing that's important that you touched on there, though, is the safety, right? So, especially if you're newer to training, you don't necessarily know what you're doing, moving a little bit slower and erring on
yeah.
the side of slower with better technique is always going to be better and safer
100%.
than it is like,
Like,
yeah, I'm just going to move
like,
fast. Elliot said, do quick reps so
yeah,
that I can,
my,
build tendon strength.
my yeah, my stance on that is basically, Logan, that generally speaking, you should move the bar or the dumbbell or whatever it is as fast as possible under control.
Yeah.
But how fast that is depends, as you were alluding to that, on who you are. If you're new to the
Yeah.
exercise, you're going to move it pretty slowly. But as you become proficient and you
Mhm.
can move it quickly, then there's a lot of benefit because, especially as you age, it's the speed and power component
Yep.
that drop off before the strength component.
Yes.
There's at least some work within a training week that is performed quickly once you're proficient is good.
Yeah. 100%. I would agree with that. No, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
Elliot, this was awesome. I'm gonna link your website. If you've got
Thank you.
time in the future, like once you hopefully get this gig with the European Football Club, I'd love to have you back on at some point in the future. And I think our listeners are going to have a bunch of really awesome takeaways from this episode. So thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you. It's so nice to be connected with you, and I look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thanks, Logan. Appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another new episode of Exercise is Bullshit.